never starts over there on the right. Never. Like I said a few minutes ago, okay? So keep that point in mind. That's one of our overriding themes. Instead of starting over there on the right, it starts with behaviors. Whether it's, they're saying something, they're doing something, saying and doing, and those are the things we're going to spend a minute on now to start that part of the discussion going. We need people, all of us, to get to the point where we're silent no more if something's bothering us. Our intuition is a very good tool, and usually if something's wrong in our intuition, it probably is wrong. And here's the important safety note here, kids. Nobody is saying, not me, not anybody, who's even this much responsible, that we're telling people, okay, everybody, all aboard to Snitchville. I want you all now to keep notes on each other and right away call the police or somebody if someone does something. Not saying that. Okay, there's 3 words you're going to hear several times. Frequency, duration, intensity. And you're also going to hear this theme, the reasonable person standard. All right, so my friend Jeff back there, he's a big guy. If he all of a sudden threw his notebook down because he had a bad moment, do I need to call Pro Force right now? No. No, we have moments, all of us. No one behavior, no one-off, not saying that. Now, if Jeff threw his notebook down in anger 3 times a day for 5-6 weeks, as well as displayed some of these other behaviors we're about to flash through, something's going on now. Doesn't mean he's going to go kill somebody, but something's wrong. And the reasonable person standard says that's not a one-off. There's something going on here. There's a pattern. There's frequency, duration, intensity. That's where we all need to be in our thought process, okay? Because if that friction point is small enough and people kind of notice it, and supervisors or someone knows some things that might help with it, way better to hit it while it's small than to wait. No checklist, right? But look at these things for just a second. By the way, I don't read slides to people, so if I go too fast, just have me back up. These things are important to start off with because this is exactly what I was just talking about. Someone who's excessively losing their temper frequently, constant displays, aggressive outbursts, threatening people, that's a problem. Something's wrong. We've all probably seen someone of this nature. And a lot of times, I have heard maybe ad nauseum, there's someone in our group that did this or that and nobody ever did anything about it. We hear this all the time. That's why we're here right now. We got to get past that. The second one, history. Best indicator of future behavior is past behavior. If someone has a history of this sort of thing, then you can reasonably expect that they could do it again. And then a quick moment on the 3rd bullet. It says ominous fascination, weapons. Okay, if someone likes guns, by itself, this is not a crime or a problem. If it is, you got to call on me right now. All right? 20 years in the Marine Corps, 8 big brothers. My dad grew up shooting, Pro Force instructor, firearms instructor. I love guns a lot. But here's what I don't do. Okay? I don't go to work and make creepy comments about guns that are just bizarre and leave the reasonable person going, whoa, what was that? I also don't do this. I don't get a picture of a gun and put it up on a wall and point an arrow towards someone's office. By the way, I didn't make that one up. That one actually happens a lot, more than you would believe. That's what that's talking about. It's also maybe, maybe you got a 50-year-old guy who nobody ever thought this guy knew what a gun was. Now, all of a sudden, he's fascinated with guns. Maybe he has guns and ammo magazines on his desk, or he's talking to people. What do you think of this, right? Noticeable change, right? Something going on there. That's weird. Now, you take that and mix it with some of these other things that we're talking about, and you start to see frequency, duration, intensity. You start to see a pattern. The violent media content and violent events, by the way, you'll see when we get to the active shooter part and how people become monsters. I'll go back to this point, but a lot of violent offenders, even not even necessarily ones that go to the full Monty of shooting and blowing people up, but they're fascinated with media violence. A lot of them are really into violent video games, which my quick soapbox for 10 seconds. Violent video games are a scourge on our society. They are doing awful things to our children. Bad, bad things. Bad things. They're no good. They are bad. If you want to know more about that, on the break after, I'll be happy to give you an earful. And I can prove it, not just me, there's a lot of smart people. They're physically altering children's brains. And I've proven it with MRIs and brain scans. Yes, sir.
Does that comment also apply to violent movies?
I'm of a mind, and by the way, I'm going to tell you about a gentleman a little later that does a lot of good work in this area. I'm of a mind that violent media content is bad all the way around, no matter how you look at it. I'm of a mind, not just intuitively, but for a lot of statistical reasons, I'm of a mind that violent media content and movies and all that are a big part of why our society has become, some of the bad parts of it have become, the courses and all that. So, I mean, that's a side discussion that we can have, but one thing's for sure, statistically, a lot of people who turn to violence, and by the way, especially the ones who turn to the ultimate, this is a part of the mix. Okay? Here's some more. I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking you might recognize yourself in some of these, right? I certainly do. I've maybe done one or two of these. Ask my daughters about bizarre comments. Sometimes they say I make bizarre comments. Again, frequency, duration, intensity. Holding grudges. Everyone does this, right? To some extent. Some people hold a grudge for 5 minutes, like me. Other people can hold a grudge for 5 years, easily. So holding a grudge by itself, just sitting there as a behavior, means nothing more than someone holds a grudge. But when it starts going to that aberrant degree, the reasonable person standard starts going, ooh, wait a minute. And it's mixed with some of these other things. How about some of these? Apparent obsession with supervisor or coworker. So the grudge thing becomes an obsession thing sometimes. Again, to the reasonable person, it's so far beyond a small obsession. We're social animals, I said it again. We sometimes get small obsessions with each other. Maybe it's a good obsession. Maybe you love someone or whatever. All the way to really bad. And what we're starting to develop in this character that we're talking through is someone, it's very noticeable that is unhealthy. Holy cow, that guy, he's really obsessed with this person, right? And you mix it with some of the other things, the bizarre comments, maybe the taping the gun up, whatever. Now we're seeing this pattern, frequency, duration, intensity. These are important to note. These things here are always noticeable if someone will only notice. They're always noticeable. Now the extreme disorganization, let me just take a second on that. If someone is in a crisis state, and I'll define that more fully in a minute, but if someone is in a point in their life, and by the way, everyone in this room, I'm sure, has been in a crisis state, as I'll define it. They don't care about things they normally care about. Okay? Here's a graphic example. There was a shooting at NASA, Johnson Control Space Center, maybe 5 years ago. You may or may not remember it. It's sometimes memorable because it's such a high security facility. So there's your complacency warning, by the way. Guy brings a gun to work to kill a coworker, and he succeeds. Hurts a few other people and then kills himself. A fairly, quote, typical workplace shooting. Now, nobody seemed to notice too many problems, although when they went in and did the postmortem, a lot of the coworkers and stuff were saying, well, yeah, this is what's going on. And so all these things start coming out. But here's what they did find. Since it's such a high security place, cameras everywhere, right? They noticed when they looked at the cameras after the fact, the guy was wearing the same clothes for several days. He was a mess. His work area was a mess. He was extremely disorganized. And he normally wasn't. So it was a noticeable change in behavior. And the reason he was, like I said, he was in a crisis state. He got to that point in his life where he decided that was his option, and so he didn't give a damn about anything else. He didn't care about his emails or work or this or that. That's where he was at. And that, by the way, that one is almost always there when someone goes into a crisis state. Suicide, quick moment here. Yes, it is violence directed inward, as the mental health professionals tell us. That's what it is. So long as it's me, my bottle of Valium, going to my room, checking out. Violence directed inward. Now, almost every active shooter incident, the overwhelming majority of them, they're all suicides. That's what they are at their heart. They're suicide. But they're not like me with my bottle of Valium. It's the ultimate hostile stab at the world on their way out, right? Think of that monster in the mall. I'm just going to take a few pieces of blank out with me. It is a suicide, but it's a different kind of suicide. Okay, and here's the crux of the whole thing, really. a person who's going to turn to violence as an option, and it doesn't have to be mass murder, it could be other forms of violence, and it could be violence, it could be suicide, it could be violence to themselves. Person who's going to be prone to that, they do have some things in common. A lot of times, most times, they are the kind of person who's not taking responsibility for their actions and they blame other people. Remember the grudge holder with the obsession? Well, this term here, injustice collector, I love it. I'm not the one who came up with it. Some smart person did. If I knew their name, I would tell you. I love to give attribution, but it really nails it. This is an injustice collector. And by the way, not all, you're going to know an injustice collector if you don't already figure it out. Doesn't always mean they're going to do violent things, okay? An injustice collector never forgets when something bad happens to them, something perceived bad. They never forget a slight. They'll tell you chapter and verse, man. 8 years ago, this guy did this to me, or that supervisor didn't let me do this. They'll remember what time of day it was. It's an injustice collector. It's aberrant. Sometimes it's so noticeable to everybody. You may know a person like this. I know a couple of them. They retaliate against perceived injustice, and you'll find out when we talk about active shooters how that thing plays out. But that's another part of this, is since they're not blaming themselves and they've become obsessed with somebody, and they're mad at that person, and they're holding this grudge, and they're blaming that person for all their problems, it really becomes a noble thing if they go retaliate against them physically. It's like, that's a bad person. They're doing bad things. I can take care of that. I'm noble. It's kind of how it works. And warning, the Marine about to go touchy-feely for a second, but only a second. Sadness. This is our best chance to really